Welcome to the Seamus Pendragon channel. I'm Seamus Pendragon, and today I've got a special guest who is also a good friend of mine, Mr. James. We call him James the Wanderer, James a lot of things. But what he's here today to discuss is a topic that I think is more prevalent than what we even want to admit. Not we, but the Christian church. And what we have here today is a self-described recovering Christian. So I wanted James to go into detail on that. Now James, his background is one of the things about him that's remarkable is he is an ordained minister. So when he talks about retreating from the Christian faith, he's not just your average person that goes to church 3 or 4 times a year. This guy was sold out to the idea of Christianity. And on the other side of that coin, James is also a degreed psychologist. So as he began to his own introspection of his thoughts and feelings on Christianity and how they related to what he was seeing, he has a perspective, I think, that's very, very deep on this subject. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James, and I would like to start it out by asking James, in your own words, if you could define what it means to you to be a recovering Christian, because you're the first person I heard that term used by. I don't know if you'd heard it somewhere, but I love it. I absolutely love the term recovering Christian. What does it mean to you?
Well, I think for me there's a lot packed into that statement, but one of the things that really shocked me when I started to lose some of my confidence in Christianity was how all-encompassing the worldview was. So Christianity is just like everything. It shapes every part of your life, where you work, what you do, all of these things. And so when I go to, man, I really need to get free from this. So that was kind of the idea, is like I'm recovering from all the Christianity that's been on me and colored I still, will look at something and go, oh, well, what would that look like if I don't have to worry about what the Bible says or what other people are going to think about me? And so that's kind of what I like to go with. But
So when you say getting free from Christianity, give us some examples. If you got one or two, just one or two off the top of your head that you can expound on a little bit, that is, I look at Christianity as this very oppressive, tyrannical belief system that imposes upon the believers that you must behave or you must live a certain way. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely the morality aspect of it is you're constantly judging your behavior, right? Measuring it according to what you think you're supposed to be doing. And I remember debating endlessly all of those nuances of this or that thing, well, what about homosexuality? What about drinking? What about, all these different areas? And I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
I don't have to debate. All I have to ask myself is this what I want to do? Is this going to harm others? And then if I really want to go to the next level, like, what's the outcome going to be? I can be a reasonable person. I don't just have to go, oh, I'm just going to do whatever the heck I feel like doing. Though I did some of that too, and it's kind of nice. I don't have to worry about what I'm doing. Oh, well, that's good.
Right.
Oh, that kind of hurt somebody. I shouldn't do that anymore. That it's the trial and error thing we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to grow. So I think that another aspect of this freedom was I don't have to support the government.
That's huge, right?
And it was like, especially, the churches that I would go to were very right-winged churches. Some more than others. One church I went to, he tried very hard not to be political, and I can commend him for that. But, I think that to me was really toxic, where you have to vote this way because of moral issues. And the government really shouldn't have any say in moral issues. But the church has made it into, that's all they care about is the moral issues. You know, we debate this abortion thing forever because it's this grand moral issue. Well, we should debate it and we should talk about it, and there are options, but it's not a moral issue. Not the sense that we talk about it. No, there's lots of moral issues that we can, and people debate these endlessly. But you have to remove religion from those discussions. When you remove the religion from it, you're left with having to make the decision yourself. See, it's about personal responsibility. That's the other thing that really tripped me out is, if I'm a Christian and I'm following God, then I kind of don't have to take responsibility for the world around me and my life. You take responsibility for your life, but I don't have to take responsibility for anybody else, right? Of the world, because God's in charge. And, you know, I still believe in a source creator. I think that's an ongoing thing, you know, but for me, that's the other part. You have to believe this thing's about God. And I go, well, why? Who says that?
Right. Who knows the mind of a God, right?
I've communicated with God and talked with them, and I get a lot of positivity, love, and forgiveness.
How many thou shalt nots
acceptance.
did you get?
None.
None.
Listen, he did. One time, I heard a voice say, "Stop lying." I'm like, that's actually pretty good advice. But
Well, it depends on the situation.
but Christianity lies all the time.
Right.
Like our whole lives, if you look at your lives, it's all based on lies. Christianity says it believes one thing and then does something totally different. You know, part of the supporting the government that Christianity does is supporting the War Department.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
And I hate that.
You talk about morality and then Christianity. This is, I'm going to ask you the direct question related to this, because this, for me, is one of those things that just absolutely has me pulling my hair out if I allowed it to bother me to the extent that it could. Is you have this Judeo-Christian nation, which is supposed to be secular, but is comprised of 98% Christians or Jews that run the Senate and the House, right? There's no room for anybody outside of that. And yet we're a nation that kills hundreds of millions of people around the world, starves little children and old people, right? In the 10 years leading up to the invasion of Iraq between 93 and 2003, we starved approximately, and they say these numbers are conservative, 500,000 people because of a food embargo imposed by the U.S., who would then sanction any country that wanted to feed those people. So how does a Christian group of people claim to be pro-life and then turn a blind eye to the starvation of 500,000 people, or a genocide in a country that we fund completely with war machines?
Yeah, well, I was a true believer, right? And I think part of it was genuine. I really believed in this love and this care that God had for us, and I thought that's what Christianity wanted to spread. And you come to find out that there are Christians who do. You know, I can certainly can't say all Christians are. No, they're not. I think it's in spite of the church that they're doing good, not because of.
I agree with that statement.
And so, but then you go, okay, why does the leadership of the church support a government that is so clearly evil, according to the Bible? Like, they're tyrannical. They killed, you know, millions and millions of people. We talk about the great, you know, Christian nation. What did we do to the indigenous people here?
We founded this nation on blood.
Like maybe up to 200 million Native Americans were killed directly because of Christian intervention.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got them sick. We drove them out of their lands. We forced them on these death marches. I mean, just terrible things. That every single one of those people doing that were Christian men.
Yeah.
Okay? And
Most
they
of them,
said,
yeah.
it's our manifest destiny. Well, okay, listen, you can debate whether someone's a real Christian or not, and that's what most Christians would do. Well, those people aren't real Christians. Those aren't real believers. And I go, listen, that doesn't really matter. Okay? They're saying that they're Christians. And Christianity lets them. Okay?
And besides that, who is to determine what a real Christian is? There are 3,000 different identifications of Christianity. The Christian church wants to ridicule, belittle, and stymie people who claim a certain sexuality. Right? But you have 3,000 variations of Christianity. Sounds a little hypocritical to me, doesn't it to you? We say there's only 2 genders. Well, there's only supposed to be one Christianity, right?
Well, that one's hilarious because I went to, unlike most people, I've gone to dozens of different denominational churches, and I've seen a lot of behind the scenes. You know, I was an associate pastor, and I
Did you say sociopathic?
Yes.
Sociopath. Oh, associate pastor. Oh, I'm sorry.
Associate. Wow, that's a candid moment for us. We'll go into that one next time. No. But it was all about being right. And that's what I realized. I remember as a child going to a church, and then the next week I went to a different church, and that church was talking badly about the church I had just been to. And I, like 6, 7 years old, I raised my hand and said, but they just said the same thing about you last week.
Right.
And you go, well, why? This is supposed to be unity, oneness. I mean, that was the thing that always drove me bananas when I was in churches. I wanted people to, we're supposed to live in community. We're supposed to, like, care about each other. I found out even the leadership didn't really care about me. They were just using me.
Yeah.
Even, so, the other people, they cared as long as it was convenient, but most of us,
serving them, right?
most of
or
us,
serving them.
well, I don't need to judge them, but I think most people are just so concerned with their own things that they don't have.
Well, I'm not necessarily judging. I'm just making an observation that what I've seen in churches, and I too, believe it or not, had belonged to the church family, dysfunctional as fuck family, but what I saw was people loving each other as long as there was something in it for them.
Yeah.
It's no different than the televangelists asking for money. They freaking love you.
Yeah.
As long as you're cracking that credit card open and sending them the numbers every now and again. And they will pray for you. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah.
They will pray for you, and boy, they look like they really mean it too, don't they?
Well, they probably do. They probably have people, say prayers. So that, not them, but they have people that do.
Right. But doesn't that kind of remind you of the old Catholic thing about buying people out of purgatory?
Well,
Like, look, the pastor right here, this pastor will pray for you if you send money now. Why don't you just pray for him anyway, right? And then if you get blessed, if God answers the prayer, send us money. Wouldn't that break the bank though?
it's we live in a society that is so self-centered and selfish, and I think that is part of the Christian culture, at least in America, for sure. And it's been part of the Christian culture since its inception.
Sure.
And reading your book, great book. I'm just saying, like, you can see that the foundations of this self-serving mindset in the church were there.
Do you think if you're a fence setter, you had already jumped off the fence when you started reading this book. Do you think that a fence setter would benefit from the greatest hoax?
Oh, yeah.
If they have an open mind to what's being said?
Well,
What was it for you, like, I'm not saying it was the book, because it wasn't. There was other things for you that had already helped make your decision. But was it things like the information contained in the book, information?
I think, I try to be a reasonable person, and when someone presents me with an argument, I want to be open to it. A lot of Christians aren't. And in fact, they're taught not to be open to any
Afraid
argument.
of any new information.
We already have the answers by these other special smart people. Have already answered that question. All you have to do is regurgitate that answer to somebody. No, think
That's
for
true.
yourself, okay? But, you know, if I'm a reasonable person, I say, well, I'm willing to listen to any argument and then see where it goes. And when I started, you know, I knew some of the negative parts about the early church, but the more I looked into some of that through our conversations and different things, and that's all in this book, it really goes, wait a second. These are the same guys that decided what the Bible was in the Bible.
Yeah.
These are the same guys who, you know, killed and murdered tens of thousands of people that didn't conform to the Christian religion when it was mandated in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Okay? And they butchered and slaughtered countless millions over the years. The church, you know, during the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, they were a huge country. And they had their own standing army, and they would go and fight battles and like conquer people and rape and pillage and slaughter. The church did this.
Yeah.
The Pope.
Yeah.
The Pope, you know, there were warrior popes, and they had like went out in battle and fought, you know, and you go, what? Yes, that's the church, and this is, and we go, well, the early church was, and I go, well, wait a second, you know, when you brought up that Josephus is the only one who the Christians claim to back up their claim of Jesus.
Yes, he is the sole.
He doesn't say anything about Jesus being the Son of God.
No.
He doesn't say anything about him dying for our sins. He doesn't say anything. He just says this Jesus guy did some miracles and got a lot of followers and then was killed.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, and Jesus was like John back then. It was the most common name in Judea.
It certainly
by
was.
far.
How in the book, when I was writing the book, before I wrote the book, I read the complete works of Flavius Josephus. Yeah. I'll bet you he had no less than 12 or 13 people named Jesus that he ran into and had encounters with, and almost every single one of them were scandalous individuals. Like they tried to kill him, they tried to steal shit from him. So I almost think, and the premise of the book, and we're just throwing that in there right now. It's mostly we're going to focus on this guy, but the premise of the book was Josephus is the sole source for Jesus.
Right.
Whether it's, I mean, the Christians know this. Everything outside of that has just been one bishop or another talking about what this other bishop said in accordance to what Josephus said.
That's a part of the problem too, is I go, well, what's the earliest manuscripts we have of the New Testament, right? Well, they're 150 AD, you know. 120, we got little scraps maybe.
Around 100, some started showing up in the form of letters, but that's when he died. So me, myself, and all the little voices in my head think that Josephus wrote a good number of those letters that ended up becoming the foundation of the church. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the fact that the reason why, and we talk about this, the House and the Senate being two groups of people that I like to call the high priests, right? They're not the high priest, that's the president. So even in a secular nation where Christianity is, we're supposed to have this wall separating church and state, we have these quote-unquote lawmakers, which is exactly what the old Judaic priests were considered, was lawmakers. So now you have these lawmakers legislating morality, one, to appease the most tight-ass conservative Christians, right? Because they are the only ones who know how you're supposed to live, right? So then we make laws that oppress people like me that are just looking to have a good time. If a Christian man sees me picking up a prostitute because it's legal, right? I don't have any ramifications because, let's face it, what fucking business does the state have regulating how I live if I'm not hurting anybody, or how she lives, right? So we get together, that Christian man sees it, realizes that no longer does he have to worry about Uncle Sam or Big Brother or anybody breathing down his neck. Now he starts making a usual stop there. Life gets better for the Christian man. Family life is good because he's getting sex. His prudish Puritan wife who's cut him off, no longer affects his psychological standpoint. But what happens is his Christian stamina has declined because now he sees that there is life after Christianity.
Well, so there's this cognitive dissonance. Okay, I want this thing, but Christianity tells me not to do that. And I agree with Christianity cognitively, but I still, something in me wants this other thing. And so it creates this, and then if I do that other thing, now I have this guilt, and that makes the dissonance even worse. Okay? But just wanting it is sinful somehow.
Yes, to think about it is to do it, right?
Right. And so, that idea that Jesus said, look at woman lustfully is to, commit adultery with her.
Every guy in America does it.
And I'm going, well...
And every woman too, by the way.
Listen, and there's a ton of guilt over this. And I go, well, who benefits? Cui bono, right? Who benefits from? And that's one of the things that I've been looking at with Christianity is why are these policies in place and who benefits? Because it's not me.
No.
I'm not benefiting. I'm not having this great moral life. Now, I think, if you're in a relationship, you should talk about those things like fidelity and monogamy and,
come to an agreement, right?
Yeah, listen, people get to be free to live however they want, and there's been proof. There's guys with monogamous genes and guys that don't have it.
Right.
I'm the former, you're the latter, okay?
Right.
And we've established this, and if I can accept you as different than me and be okay with that.
Yes.
That is huge.
Yes.
But if I'm sitting here thinking you're a worthless piece of trash that needs to go to hell, which is what Christians think. I had someone close to me say this to me, and it just blew my mind. We were talking about another couple and their debate about whether they should have children or not. And they said, well, they shouldn't have kids because they're not Christians, and so that kid's going to go to hell. And I'm sitting there and thinking...
That's heavy.
And I'm thinking about 2/3 of the world's population, 3/4 of the world's population are not Christians.
Right.
So...
They deserve to die.
Out of every 4 people should just...
Are inhuman.
Should just be dissipated. Christians don't want to see all the blood and guts and tears, right? But they like they like the idea of them just being gone.
Yeah.
And they have this idea of heaven, and they're like, well, we're gonna, be raptured out of this earth, and we'll go to this new place, and it'll just be us, and it'll be amazing.
Where do they get those stories from?
And you go, that brings up another point. One of my big problems with Christianity has always been that it is a absolute religion. It's a world religion. Okay, it says this is true for everybody. So everybody has to be a follower of Jesus, whatever that means, because that means a lot of different things. I think the idea that you say a little prayer for 2 minutes, doesn't get you there. A lot of Christians would say, yeah, that's just the start of it. Look, I've debated the whole thing. What it comes down to is this. We all need to live our life the best way we can. We all need to support one another in living that life. And I think most people respond very positively to love and care, right? And attention. We all crave fellowship and community.
Absolutely.
We want other people to be happy. If you ask somebody else if they're okay with other people being happy, they're like, yeah, I want people to be happy. Do you want to be happy? Yes, I want to be happy. We all want to be happy, and yet we're so terribly miserable.
Well, it's something that brought up, like you were talking about the church condemning somebody because they want that thing, right? Now, that one thing that you're talking about, I happen to use sex as an example because it's the easiest thing to use. It's one of the primary driving motivations in the human psyche, in the human biology, is sex.
Yeah.
So the very thing that's the biggest driver of humanity is the one thing they attack so feverishly, so intensely, as to literally break the spirit of man and woman, right? They want to break you down and say that something that is entirely natural, absolutely necessary, should only be done to reproduce. Anything outside of that is a perversion of the intended use.
This is really interesting because when you look at the origins of this mindset of monogamy and controlling the sexuality of people, you look back at Rome, and Rome started doing this with their soldiers. They started forbidding them from being married so that they didn't have to worry about all these women and these offspring just, that they had to support. It was about money. Okay? The Catholic Church did the same thing with their priests. Did you know that priests could get married until, I think it was almost like 600 AD?
It was a while, yeah.
So hundreds of years, and then they're finally like, no, this is costing the church too much goddamn money. Listen, the Pope was going bankrupt paying for these 12 children because these priests, they're paid to just be the priests, and so what else they got to do?
Got a lot of time to do fucking, right?
You just make children.
Yeah, right.
So they're like, nah, we're going to remove their ability to have wives so that we don't have to pay for it. Listen, and monogamy was all about control also, right? So the sexuality part that the church has played has been a horror to humanity.
Absolutely.
Or horror.
Absolutely.
Because it sets us, it divides us. I mean, the church supported the laws that banned interracial marriage. The whole time.
Yeah.
And Europe,
listen,
horrible.
It's funny you bring that up. And it was Christians that fomented that.
Absolutely.
It wasn't until 1968, I believe, when 30 of the 50 states actually made it so that you couldn't discriminate against mixed marriage. Up to that point, there was 30 fucking states in the United States that's up till 1968 that said, oh, that's against the law for a black man and a white woman to be together. Nope, not going to have it. The church said, yes, that's how we want it.
Yes, the church wouldn't perform the marriages.
Oh, even my sweet old grandmother, and she was a sweetheart, devout Christian right up to the day she died. She's one of the few people that I would say epitomized what Christianity represents. Mm-hmm. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But mostly the good on her part, because that's the person she was. But I can remember being little, and the reason why she was opposed to mixed marriage was why? Because the Bible says it's wrong. Yeah. The Bible says that it's wrong. So when you live your entire life based on a manuscript of, I call it the greatest fraud ever, okay, the holy fairy tale, and you're living your life based on something that these freaking whoever wrote up 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, whatever, and you're still living your life by that? What the hell is wrong with you?
No, but see, listen, people want to be right, okay? Especially people who are drawn to the church, okay? That's why there's 3,000 plus different denominations in the church, okay? Because this guy's like, no, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm going to go do my own thing. But this drive to be right is an instinctual drive, okay? And so if we have a book, an ancient manuscript, and it tells us how to be right, that's very attractive. And that's exactly why the church created it and uses it to manipulate people. And that's what I realize. It's all of the Bible is about control. Now, it's not like it's all so terribly bad, because you can't do that. If it was terribly bad, nobody would accept it. So you seed it with all kinds of stuff. But a lot of the concepts that we claim as great in the New Testament, right? They're ancient concepts.
Yeah.
They're old stories that are
the only good stuff that's in there comes from antiquity.
Absolutely.
And from various different peoples.
The Greek philosophers already had talked about the brotherhood of man and the need to love each other and to sacrifice themselves. This was 500 years before Jesus was supposed to be alive.
Yeah.
The Indians and had, Hinduism and Buddhism, which venerated self-sacrifice and love. I mean, Christianity acts like it's the inventor of love, It's not. It's the inventor of a tyrannical church-state system that is about controlling every aspect of the human being.
Part of the sickness of humanity is Christianity. Christianity is the sickness of humanity because of the image of the type of love that they project. They project love, peace, and forgiveness, but they exercise none. Now, that had to be part of your journey in seeing this, right?
Well,
like
that always bothered me. That always bothered me. And I thought, well, okay, why don't I just work on me? And I'll try to like make myself live that way. And it's very difficult, you know. And I have found connecting to the source a lot more love and forgiveness for myself and for others. And so again, Christianity kind of accidentally, you know, people do that in Christianity, but they think it's because they're performing according to this certain standard, or because they have this blood of Jesus that washes them clean. Look, you don't need to be washed clean.
No, because you're not dirty.
What you need to do is accept yourself.
Yeah.
And then if you can make change after that. If you see there's this, you know, I don't like this thing about myself, then you can get help, you can get encouragement. There's opportunities, but you have to accept that first. And Christianity tells you to do everything but accept yourself.
Yeah.
No, you're a worthless sinner destined for eternal damnation. What's that?
Yeah.
Like the idea of hell was another one that just always irked me so bad. Because I go, who benefits? What's the point? You know who benefits from the doctrine of hell? The church.
And government, I would say.
Sure. But, right. So
how do you keep people in line?
If you are in danger of going to hell, that's a powerful motivator to not do a certain thing, or at least not get caught doing a certain thing. I mean, you know, how many popes had children, you know?
After the marriage thing was like no longer allowed. How many priests impregnated women? I think that's why they started picking on little boys, because they didn't have to worry about them getting pregnant. Because they impregnated a lot of young women who were in the convent, and then they would send them off to another church like, well, you're going over here because you're pregnant and we can't have that here, so you're going to show up there and they're going to care for you. They just kept doing the same shit over the centuries, just with different people. But
the hypocrisy and the bigotry and the lying, and I mean, so again, we're talking about my journey away from Christianity, and there's all of those things. But I think the final straw was when I realized that I didn't need it. Like, I woke up and I was like, I don't need to call myself a Christian anymore. Like, calling myself a Christian was this badge of honor. Like, I belong, I'm good, I'm a Christian. Like, that's what, it was this identity that was just so firm in me. And we would talk and you were like, kind of talking like whether I was still a Christian or not, and I was kind of like, well, I don't know. And so I kind of debated this, and I tried going to this church again here, and oh my God, it was the worst. So bad, just so bad, and what it, but it was epitomized what Christianity had become for me, because it was this guy who was just like me. This is the guy I wanted to be. That was on the trajectory of becoming.
Because you believed that was the right thing to do.
But he just pandered to his crowd. He stirred up hate against anybody who wasn't a Christian. He reinforced behavior modification and the need to conform to these Christian ideals, no matter what. And it was just so revolting. Because it's hateful, it's bigotry, it's I mean, they literally think everybody else should die.
Yes.
And some people, I was thinking about being a missionary, and they're like, we have to go and save those poor souls from hell, because they're all going to hell because they've never heard about Jesus. And I'm like, no God I believe in would ever do something like that. You never heard about this thing, but that's your fault, so you're going to spend eternity condemned to hell. Like, no way could I reconcile that. Okay, there's these people. How many, billions of people have lived in the history of the world? I think it's like, 200, 300 billion
It's
people.
a lot of people, I'm sure.
How many of those are Christians?
They're all lost. They're lost to eternity.
Maybe like 10, 30, 40 billion. So you're saying if we go with today's standard, which is not true, it's going to be way less than that. It's going to be like 10 billion out of 200 billion. So all those people, and Christians are like, oh yeah, isn't that great that I get to go to heaven, and all these people they have to suffer because God's just, and that's how justice works. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, it cannot be that way. It doesn't. I couldn't allow that to sit in my mind anymore. It couldn't be there. And I'd always had a problem with it my whole life. I've always had something's wrong. But you can't say that.
Right.
I'm a freaking pastor. I can't say I don't believe hell exists. So there have been pastors who have said this. I'm not like the first guy to do this.
No.
And
they lose everything.
Well, they get kicked out of their church and they get dismissed, and because you have to toe the line. You have to follow in these footsteps. You have to, agree with everything that's come before you. It's
no different than being an archaeologist from one of the main universities. You're going to stick to whatever line has been told before you. If humanity is 10,000 years old, God damn it, it's 10,000. And if you say any different, we're going to ostracize you. The scientific community is very similar to the Christian community in that way. But I like what you've said so far about this. I think it's time for us to take a break. So, James, one of the things that I talk about quite a bit, and I think it's something that you as well have discovered, is the church has a fear of anybody getting information. And I mean, like, when you imprison someone like Galileo Galilei for the last 10 years of his life and forbid him from printing anything scientific which would deny the validity of this divine Bible, would you say that that's got to be one of their biggest faults, is the fact that they prohibit or strongly discourage anybody exploring new possibilities?
Absolutely. Because one of the main tenets of Christianity is that they have all the answers. That God has given them all of the answers. Now, obviously, some Christians will be less, dogmatic about that than others, but they, in general, prohibit you from being curious about other religions, unless it's just to evangelize to them. It prohibits you from gaining truth from any secular sources. So all you listen to is the Christian guys, right? The Christian news source and the Christian music and the Christian, because they create their own little self-reinforcing environment. And that's the idea. And so once I started getting free of that, because I'm a naturally very curious person, and I started learning about some other things and started seeing some of the validity in these other things. And I'd always seen some positive things about Buddhism and Plato and other, I'm somewhat of an intellectual, so I've gotten things from that. And I go, well, this was before Jesus, so it's okay. It's like this is the previous thing, but that's the justification. But now I look at it and go, man, why was I so naive to believe these people when they said they had all the answers? Nobody has all the answers.
No.
We need to be curious. We need to have freedom to explore. I mean, the Renaissance came about because of a decline in Christianity, and because they were curious, they were explorers. They went around the world and they painted these beautiful paintings, and we had this literature and plays and all these things coming out of the Renaissance. Science, amazing things. And the church squashed it.
Yeah. The Protestant movement, the Reformation, pretty much killed it.
And then we had, a couple hundred years later, the Enlightenment. And these philosophers were really exploring what it means to be human, and how do we relate to the world? How do we relate to each other? What is the purpose of life? And they were exploring these things. And then again, the church killed it.
You know,
because they said, no, we
Yeah.
are right.
Yeah.
We and Christianity in America has particularly been important because it has been the enforcer. It's the one that keeps everybody in line because we're a bunch of rebels. So the government knew that if they treat us badly, we're going to rebel against them also. So we really have to reinforce Christianity because Christianity says that you shouldn't rebel against authority, even though that's what America was founded on.
but remember though, this is a big thing because a lot of people, Christian people, would advocate that the founding fathers were all Christians and that they wanted this country built on Christian values. That's the biggest pile of bullshit ever backed up and dumped into your fucking front yard, with maybe the possible exception of all of these bullshit wars that we fight are to preserve our freedom. Those lies are one is just as big as the other. Most of them were deist. Our founding fathers were deist. They were also, many of them were free thinkers.
Absolutely, yes, and they didn't put a ton of stock in their Christianity or their belief in God. You have to take responsibility for the direction of your own life. Christianity, having the answer also gives you the direction. It says this is how you're supposed to live your life.
Yeah.
And we want that answer, but we don't want to have to make the sacrifices necessary to figure it out.
So you think, I look at, you talk about exploration is what set you free.
Right.
So, like the burning of the library at Alexandria, the banning of books, the subjugation of people that have explored outside of the cave. Okay, so you made it outside the cave, did you? Well, come over here and let us cut your tongue out so you can't tell anybody else what's out there. That has to be like this grinding aspect of the more you discovered because of your curiosity.
Right.
And because of your lack of fear of reading information that before was off limits. You started to read things and explore areas that were kind of off limits before. You didn't want to look at that stuff.
Well, it was with a new lens. If I had read it before, it was always in how can I relate to this to Christianity, or reconcile this with Christianity, or refute this with Christianity.
Okay.
So it was always, the Christian worldview is this lens you peer through, and you're looking at everything through this lens. So once I took that lens off and just looked at it, I go, oh, well, this is actually true. I mean, ancient history, you learn about the Sumerians, and they have a creation story that's, documented at least 2,000 years older than the Old Testament.
At least. It's actually, yeah. Yeah.
So which story you think is closer to the truth? If you're talking about a creation story, the one that's 2,000 years old is much closer to the creation than the one that's not.
Right.
And you can clearly see that the Old Testament story is an amalgamation of this old Sumerian story. So it's been cycled through and washed and cleaned up and,
made ours, right?
Yeah.
We took all of these gods, right? We took all the gods of the pantheon and we made them into one god. Now that does create some issues. It creates a bipolar god.
Right. Well, I think it's the male dominance of that god that really is striking. You see this supreme authority of the priesthood, right? Mm-hmm. That the priesthood is in charge of everything. I mean, Israel wasn't even supposed to have a king at all. They were just supposed to be ruled by these prophets and priests.
Yes.
Okay? That's what Christianity would like to go back to, by the way.
They're almost there.
They think it would be great if just,
I think they're almost there.
A Christian dictator was
They have a Christian
charge.
dictator in office right now. His name is Donald Jesus Trump.
Yes.
He is the Christian savior.
He's just a self-centered old man.
What is Yahweh?
Yeah, but that's kind of this point, is that if God is this tyrannical God who demands allegiance, or he will torment you for all of eternity, and he's a man, it's always father, it's always he, okay, so it's a male dominates. There's a lot of nuance on there, but one of the things that really I think is important to see is you don't have to live in that anymore. You don't have to adhere to that anymore. You can be curious. You can still even call yourself a Christian. Just, if you can just at least let other people believe what they want, and maybe there's truth in what other people believe. That gives you a lot more compassion for people. If I can go, oh, you're a valuable person, and I want to learn about what you believe because maybe I can gain something from that. That's the mindset. Most Christians are sitting here with a non-Christian and they're like, how do I convince this person to be a Christian?
Right. Right.
That's the lens.
Right.
That's the only reason you're supposed to talk to a non-Christian is so that you can convert them to Christianity. Though, of course, most Christians haven't. There's another cognitive dissonance. Like 1% of Christians actually lead other Christians to
or
the
sinners.
Lord. Yeah.
Us lost souls.
Whatever it is. And it's because they, deep down somewhere, they know, maybe this isn't the best thing for everybody.
Maybe. It's a big line of bullshit.
Kind of a tyrannical thing in my life.
I always love and you get it with a lot of celebrities. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Well, I'm not a good Christian, but I'm a Christian. What the fuck is that? I'm not a good Christian. Well, first of all, I've read that fucking Bible. And the reason why a lot of it, I'm saying, when he's saying through the lens of a Christian, I'm going, oh, even though I was a Christian, I weren't a good Christian. Matter of fact, I was doing what most of them do, and I was faking it. Because I had to fit in. It's kind of like that Marilyn Manson song, right? I'm not man enough to be human, but I'm learning to fake it because I want to fit in. That's literally where I was at most of my life. Since the time I was 12 years old, I was like, this shit is fucked up. So, but I faked it really well, to the point where even later in life, after I hadn't been in the church, I'm like, man, I probably should get back in church. I couldn't do it because I couldn't bring myself, because I looked at all this and I go, I don't believe it anymore. And just like you sitting underneath this preacher and you just losing your frickin' mind, right? Like, after realizing the pile of bullshit you just dug yourself out of, and then you're listening to this guy and you're going, I can't do this, right?
I just, it's so pointless. They act like, oh, we're going to sit here and we're going to really learn something. Like, if you actually, as a Christian, you just sit around in a circle and say, hey, how can we care? Who needs about you? And you take turns for every person to share and be cared for. Man, that would be amazing. And
that
Christianity allows you to do that.
Yes.
Except for they don't.
Well, if you're outside the group.
What I'm saying is, it fits within the religious model of Christianity, but most people don't want to do it because they're uncomfortable with that. You don't need a pastor. You don't need a teacher. Even the Bible says you don't need anyone to teach you. The Spirit will lead you into all truth.
Can you imagine, just as you're saying, like, if you have a group of Christians, now, there are certain rare Christians, as individuals, and I believe this for a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians alike, that individually people are better than when they're in a group. Mm-hmm. So, like, we're sitting in a group, and everybody's getting help, right? Like, well, I'm suffering under this, or, I'm really trying to deal with this. And then it comes around and I go, I'm not married, by the way. I hate the institution of marriage. But, well, I'm having marital problems with my husband. They'd all be like looking at each other going, what the fuck do we do with this? We're supposed to help this fucker? We can't. We cannot support him.
Wow.
Don't you think?
Well, of course not. Yeah, because
where would that put him?
But see, that's where you accept people where they're at, even if you disagree. Like, it's totally fine to disagree. You do disagree.
Yes.
You shouldn't deny it.
Right.
You disagree with your Christian friends just as much as you disagree with your non-Christian friends, because we all have a very different viewpoint, and humanity is about, I think, accepting that uniqueness, expressing our uniqueness, and encouraging each other with our uniqueness. Collaborating. That's what when you homogenize anything, and that's really what any major religion does.
Oh, yeah.
Buddhism does the same thing. Muslims horribly do the same thing. Christianity horribly does that. They homogenize. Everybody has to adhere to this. Mm-hmm. This is the absolute truth. You have
all
to
of the
live this way.
monotheistic religions are the worst. You have, like Hinduism, you have the great pantheon of gods and goddesses, and there's books for all of them.
Yeah.
Right? It's only the monotheistic religions that will kill you for having other beliefs. These endless wars in the Middle East are nothing more than a continuation of the Christian crusades started oh so many years ago, and they're carried out with the blessing of millions of Christians that live in the United States and around the world. They do not protest the killing of innocent people because they belong to a different religion.
Yeah, it's the spirit that surrounds us, that embodies us, that lives all around us, wants us to care for one another. It wants us to love each other. It wants us to value each other. And if you can't do that, we at least respect each other and give them freedom. You know, again, the Christian church does not stand for freedom.
No.
Our government does not stand for freedom. They stand for tyrannical obedience to authority. That's what they stand for.
Yep.
And that's the thing that when you get free from Christianity, you can be free.
All right, James. I think at this time we're gonna wrap it up. I'd like to thank you for coming on the channel, being on the show. We're going to see a lot more of James because of such dynamic conversation that he and I share on a lot of different subjects. A lot of it's going to be centered towards the church and state domination of everybody's lives and different subjects related to that, mostly politics and war and probably everything under the sun. Is there anything you want to send them off with?
I just, really like to encourage everyone to explore. You don't have to change your mind right away, but realize that maybe you're wrong. Maybe what you've been told your whole life is wrong. Because, the evidence would suggest that it is. And, if you want to just stick your head in the sand, that's your choice. But if you want to learn the truth, if that's really what you're seeking, look, find, seek, and you will find, ask the questions. And if you just get a perfunctory answer, if you just get the answer that everybody's been regurgitating for 500 years, is that really satisfying to you? Is that really the answer that you want? Because it's not anymore for me. I realize that I want to see the value in everyone and their perspective, and to show people love and compassion without demanding that they adhere to whatever I think. Because that's what Christianity ultimately is. It's a social control system where you can homogenize the belief system so that you can better control the individual. That's what you want to support. That's the thing that you want to be. Call yourself. I'm good.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you, man. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up.